All the martyrs that died were a witness for the truth. Christ could not have come in AD 100 or shortly thereafter because there was another prophecy in Daniel, in 2 Thessalonians. That's right. There were prophecies that had not yet been fulfilled.
Okay, now, here comes the question. Did God give the prophecies to Daniel because he intended for things to go that way and made sure they did? Or did he give those prophecies to Daniel because he knew that was what man was going to end up doing? And my question here means that, of course we're talking about predestination, but we're also talking about the fulfillment of the script that has to play out to show the universe what sin does and the character of God versus the character of Satan. In other words, it's not just because the prophecy in Daniel hadn't been fulfilled yet. God's the one who gave him that prophecy for a reason. And the reason was because the sin scene has to be played out in its completion before Jesus can come to prove the character of God versus the character of Satan.
What God foreknows doesn't necessarily mean that God predestines.
Right.
God knows how long it's going to take.
Right. He didn't arbitrarily pick this amount of time.
No.
He just knew that it would take these events to show the universe the truth.
God could have come ere this. In the mid-1800s, when the Laodicean church began, it was not God's intention that time should go on another 150 years.
That was at that point, not at...
That's right, because that 2300-day prophecy had been fulfilled. It was time for God's people to believe his message, have their hearts and lives transformed, and go to heaven. For this whole mess to be over with.
But my point is, the 2300-day prophecy wouldn't have even had to be 2300 days if humans could have played out the scenario of sin sooner.
Well, but it took time for that, like Tori said, it took time for that prophecy of 2 Thessalonians that we studied about. It took time for that to be fulfilled.
To be fulfilled and fully revealed.
And fully revealed.
She's talking about the character of Christ versus the character of Satan in the great controversy.
And God is patient. He will allow all the time necessary for every mind to be convinced of his value and Satan's problem. And that takes time because we're stubborn and we're blind and we don't really want to pay attention. The sanctuary had to be cleansed, and here again we see the comparison. On the bottom, you have one Jewish year that was fulfilled through the work of the sanctuary, every year repeated over again. That parallels up to the Christian era, in which every part of that Old Testament sanctuary system is fulfilled. The type meets the antitype in the history and work of Jesus Christ. And we're reading more about these prophecies being fulfilled as we study through the book of Revelation. So now let's look at the four horsemen. I already read the scripture. The opening of the four seals follows in rapid succession. It only takes 8 verses to cover this entire history. God does not dwell on a whole lot of detail like he did when he talked about the 7 churches. Remember? There was detail given in that. But he says, now I've already given you this detail when we talk about the 7 churches. I don't have to cover that a whole lot now. Just highlight a couple of things. The reformers were taking the prophetic position here of the Protestant reformers. They knew that history had fulfilled these first 4 horses. They knew that. They could look at history and they could see that that white horse was parallel to the Ephesus church period because they knew that the gospel's message had already conquered and done its work. They knew that the red horse was the Smyrna church period because they knew that that was the time of pagan persecution against the church, when red represented bloodshed and war. They knew that peace was taken from the earth and taken from the Christian church at that point. During the Ephesus period, there was great peace among Christians. Not during the Smyrna period. Edward Gibbon stated that during this time the Christian church was converted by discord to the image of chaos, nocturnal tempest, and hell itself. There was that much turmoil going on. The black horse, just by following this line of reasoning, we understand that the black horse was the Pergamus church period. Now, black is a sign of evil or decay. If your toe turns black, it's rotten. So we see moral and spiritual decay taking place. We understand that during the Pergamus church was when Christianity was married to paganism, remember? As the stream of Christianity flowed farther from its foundation, it became more and more corrupt. And as the centuries advanced, superstition advanced with it, till at length the book of God was being laid aside for legendary tales and the traditions of men. All these corruptions were collected into a regular system of superstition and oppression. Note the date that this book was written, 1805, before these misunderstandings on the fulfillment of prophecy came into place in 1830. Back to the Bible. Read verses 5 and 6. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Wheat was more expensive than barley. So he only got 1 measure of wheat for a penny, but you could get 3 measures of barley for a penny because it was a cheaper grain. Only the poor people bought barley and made bread out of it. Edward Gibbon, reports that during this time period, the Roman Caesars granted citizenship to all free men, but not to slaves. Citizenship, I mean, you could be, living in Rome, but you didn't necessarily, living in the nation of the empire of Rome, but not necessarily be a Roman citizen. Well, Caesar decided that, hey, I can make more money if I make everybody a citizen, and then I can tax them. So that's what he did. He expanded his tax base. And Gibbon says the land tax, the capitation, and the heavy contributions of corn, wine, oil, and wheat extracted from the provinces for the use of the court, the army, and the capital put a great burden on the people. The body of Caracalla's subjects were oppressed by the aggravated taxes, and every part of the empire was crushed under the weight of Rome's iron scepter. Gibbon refers to the oppressive laws that demanded that the land be heavily taxed based on its productivity. So if you were a farmer, the more you produced, the more you were taxed. This led landowners to deliberately reduce grain production to avoid the high taxation. The practice of destroying crops to avoid taxes became so widespread that the government issued an edict forbidding the destruction of what? Olive trees and grapevines. And what did the verse say? See thou hurt not the oil and the wine. So this is a literal fulfillment of the prophecy. It took place during this time. Hurt not the oil and the wine. The edict went out from Rome. Don't cut down your olive trees. Don't destroy your vineyards. Isn't that amazing?
If they were doing that, how'd they avoid imprisonment and now starvation? I mean, if you destroy all your food and your food source.
Doesn't it say a measure of wheat for a penny?
That means the source.
It caused a problem. It caused an economic and food problem.
So
More taxation causes a food problem.
Yeah. Rick?
Penny being their day's wages.
That's right. So they so destroyed the crops because they didn't want to pay taxes that what you earned in a day was all you could eat in a day. You had to work every day in order to get a little bit of food. It did cause economic problems. Heavy taxation.
did they have famine? Did it cause a famine then?
I don't know that it caused a famine like with a plague or something, but yes, there was a food shortage. And that's historically documented. But what really struck me when I read, in Gibbon's history there, Gibbon wasn't a Christian.